All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you for joining us today. We're joined by Henry County Schools today, and we'll introduce our guests in just a moment. First, I'm Benjamin Aguion, the head of education sales here at Neverware. We have Peter Freudenberger as well.
Hello, everyone.
And he's our senior sales engineer. We'll be going through a little bit about Henry County's transition to a Google environment. Just some housekeeping items. You can tweet at us as well as Henry County throughout this presentation. Ask us questions. We love to engage there. And a recording will be available at the end of the webinar for your convenience or anyone you want to share it with. So what we're going to cover today, a little bit about Neverware, and then most importantly, an introduction to our guests. And a bit about how they've made the shift to Google, how they actually went about implementing Chrome devices in G Suite, how they're using their old devices, and then opening up for questions towards the end. So a little bit about us. We are backed by Google both as a partner and as an investor. They invested into us as part of our Series B in the fall. And we've been around for about 7 years, headquartered in New York, with offices in London as well, and got about 500,000 unique installs of CloudReady around the world. So pretty robust user base. About 1,500 school districts throughout the US that are using CloudReady day to day. Our flagship product, CloudReady, is an operating system. It turns computers up to 12 years old, PCs and Macs, into Chrome devices, and basically unifies how they're managed in the Google admin console. So enabling districts like Henry County to make the shift with their old PCs. So without further ado, we have Jeffrey St. Aime here and David Carter. If you guys can introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about each of you, that would be awesome.
Good afternoon. My name is David Carter. I am, my title is Network Coordinator here at Henry County Schools. Have the opportunity to work with a great, awesome team of people here that have, this was a year, our first year of a student learning device rollout where we rolled out about 35,000 Chromebooks across the district, and that is our primary student learning device across the district here. We were also left with a lot of aging Windows devices in the district as well, and we wanted to be able to utilize those for some testing applications within the district as well for students who maybe weren't able to bring a Chromebook to school that day, or they were having some technical issues with their Chromebook, and we knew we had some Windows devices left that we wanted to be able to transition and still be able to utilize, and CloudReady really came in as a strong product to allow us to be able to get some several more years of usage out of the product that we have here. I'm joined by Jeffrey St. Aime, who is our technical platform specialist for the Google for our Google environment, and we'll let him introduce himself.
Hello, my name is Jeffrey St. Aime. As Dave mentioned just now, I'm the enterprise platform specialist for Henry County Schools. Manage everything from Google environment, involved with testing, as well as running solutions and some other platforms that are used across our districts. I've had some experience working with CloudReady from before, and having used the customer grade of CloudReady to just test their product in the past, and the opportunity came, as Dave mentioned, when we were going one-to-one, and we needed additional devices that would be able to support testing environment for students when they do come to schools and one is missing, or again, students that did not have their devices for one reason or another, whether or not the damages and so forth. And CloudReady was able to provide us with a solution that helped the transition to be extremely smooth, and we had our best testing environment this past school year, and that was thanks in part to the solution that CloudReady was able to provide us.
And David, Jeffrey, can you guys tell us a little bit about your team and how it's structured, a little bit about the district as well?
Sure. So we're a district that's a little south of Atlanta. We've got a little over 42,000 students in the district. About almost 5,000 staff members here and this is spread out across about 50 locations. So we're a pretty wide ranging district as far as landscape and as far as supporting many different sites. We have, again, like I said earlier, this was our first year of a full, student device rollout that provided every student in the district with a device. So every student in K through 2 is working with iPads, and then 3 through 12 has their own Chromebooks. So we have fully transitioned to an online testing district. So all of our testing is online. So the ability to be able to leverage the Chromebooks and then the CloudReady Chromebooks for testing has been a really huge benefit for us this year. We pretty much run all of our IT operations out of our central office. We have technicians located in every building, but we've got our team overall is about 100 plus people that support both from an instructional and a technology, an IT perspective. So we've had the ability to build a really great team this year and a very successful implementation of Chromebooks and these student learning devices over this last school year.
Very cool. Well, if you're cool with this, I thought it would be good to showcase for people a little bit about how you guys have actually transitioned from Google from the very beginning. Traditionally a Windows district, and so can you talk about what your tech looked like beforehand, before this transformation, a bit about why you guys decided to change and when that happened, kind of that progression.
Sure. So, in previous years, we were primarily a Windows, shop. We did have some Chromebooks, and we started building our base Google environment a couple of years ago, and with an implementation of Google Directory Sync and the other aspects that go along with building that. But what we were careful in doing, and we really wanted to do, was not let technology drive the decision of what devices were going to be used in the classroom. We knew that we wanted to be able to provide student learning devices, but the question was, what is that right device? And we really wanted to involve our instruction team and the instructional department about what that right device is. We didn't want technology to be the ones that necessarily, put that device out there. And it was a very collaborative decision between instruction and technology and everybody within the district about what that right device was, to be able to really, move the needle on instruction and what happens in the classroom, because that's really what we're here to support overall. And that's the common goal that we work towards here. So it was really a collaborative effort between instruction and technology and everybody in the system to choose that right device. And really, we landed back on a device that met all the needs of instructions. And it also was a device that we felt like that we could support at an expected level of support from the schools. We would be able to get the applications out quickly. It was a pretty agile device that we could make changes onto. The Google environment allowed us to make those changes in a pretty quick manner. So it really landed on that device just because of what instruction drove. We really wanted instruction to drive what this device was, and it was a collaborative effort, but it was based on what was the right device for instruction in the classroom.
Mm-hmm. And this was at what point in time? Was this back in 2016 or?
Yeah, this last year was the first year that we did this rollout. Originally, this rollout was planned as a 3-year rollout. We were going to kind of phase this into a few schools or every year. And in some discussions with that, we wanted to be able to provide this as you know, as quickly as we could to everybody. So what it amounted to was a 3-year plan, pretty much got condensed down into a 6-week plan. So we were able to bring on the right partners, the right vendor partners, and kind of ramp up our team here to get this done. And we really did this device rollout in about 6 weeks. So that was really 35,000 devices in approximately 6 weeks.
I'm Jeffrey here. So one of the advantage in making the shift to Google is what we learned from the time when the Google environment was introduced into the district about 2015, 2014-ish, is that as other district experience, it was an easier platform for students to gravitate to. With the tools that Google have made available in Google Classrooms and Docs and the collaboration efforts that Google have put forward, made it very easy for the staff and the students to be able to transition to that. It made it a win-win situation for us to be able to make that decision, because if the students and the teachers already buy into the system, obviously it's a lot easier to adapt into that environment if the students and the teachers are already working in it. So it made the decision a lot easier for us to move in that direction.
So were a lot of your students and teachers already using G Suite at that time?
During the time of the one-to-one rollout, yes, they'd been using G Suite for about a year, a little bit over 2 years actually.
And it wasn't 100% buy-in. It was a mixture. Some of them dabbled in Microsoft Classroom, and it was kind of a mixture of what was out there. We really gave schools the autonomy to kind of find what the right fit was for them. But then ultimately, I think everybody kind of landed on a single vision, and that's what led us kind of to the Chromebooks.
Got it. And so when you, I guess when you decided that, okay, Chromebooks are for us, how did you guys kind of go about making it happen as far as approvals, funding, getting buy-in from principals and teachers and everyone involved, parents too?
So this project was really it was funded overall by a SPLOS for us. That was it's really just a sales tax that was able to fund this project and other technology projects within the district to support that. This was really obviously our biggest push in the district. So once we kind of landed on the device, once we landed on the fact that we're going to do this one-to-one, it was kind of all hands on deck at that point. We knew that we had to do some data center build outs that were going to support that, because when we brought that many devices on board at one time, we were at approximately 16,000 devices in the district prior to this. So we went from 16,000 devices to upwards of 50,000 devices just about overnight. And when I say overnight, I mean within about 6 weeks' time. So we knew we had to build a data center, the bandwidth, and everything that sits behind that to support it. So we had kind of planned the data center build out and what we needed to do. So once we got the go ahead, we were kind of already lined up at the starting line. We just needed the word go. So once we got the word go, we kind of began to start lining up the vendor partners that we were going to work with. We knew a big part of this is how we rolled this many devices out this fast. And a big part of that is, how do we keep them inventoried? How do we manage the break fix and the work order systems that back end all of that? So it was really key to find the right vendor partners that we could work with that could meet those demands and meet those demands within a really, really short time period. We've got a great group of internal engineering and development folks here, but when you talk about how to scale it that quickly, we knew having the right vendor partners was a big part of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know we've both had the pleasure of working with such partners as like Virtucom Are there any other partners that you guys found to be integral to the process, and kind of what roles did they play specifically?
Yeah, so Lexicon plays a big role in that. There's a company that's local here with us, Lexicon, that we chose to go with for the rollout, the management, the break fix, kind of an ADP plan around the devices. They were really able to scale up and ramp up to be able to help get these devices rolled out and then continue the plan around that. They actually developed the work order system, the asset tracking and inventory system to be able to support this on the back end, because putting out 35,000 Chromebooks without an inventory system, we knew would be a nightmare. So we had to have some way to track it. So we really found a company that really does that to a T. They had some experiences doing it with smaller school systems around the Atlanta area. But Lexicon really was able to jump in there with us and work a plan that we could get this done in that time period. And then, like you said, Virtucom also helps with that, as well as technicians in our building to support it on the back end. It's all about making sure we keep it supported, and that's really the key to it, was how do we support it and how do we maintain it for the long term, not just how we roll it out and get the devices in their hands, but how we sustain that throughout the school year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I guess as you were trying to plan this, make sure everything was supported, contract with outside service providers and vendors, internally, were you guys were there actions taken before that or during or after that, as far as professional development for teachers, et cetera? Was there kind of a project and timeline in place for kind of kicking off that one-to-one?
Yeah, we did. We had, with part of this, there was some restructuring internally in technology department, and along with that, it kind of brought in our instructional technology division under technology. So at that, we could have kind of all worked together to kind of work toward that single vision. And our instructional technology folks were able to reach out and bring in some assistance from KSU, which is they worked with the iTeach folks at KSU to bring in that professional development to be able to really get the teachers the tools they needed from an instructional standpoint of how to use the Chromebooks, how to leverage the Chromebooks, and make a difference in the classroom with those Chromebooks. So yes, we did have some support from some other instructional side folks that were really able to make a difference in how that got utilized in the classroom. And it's also ongoing. We have some work that we'll be doing with them for the next 3 years that will continue to build on top of that.
Got it. And KSU is Kennesaw State University? Is that?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Got it. So tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that you ran into along the way. I imagine it wasn't all smooth sailing, although it was quite a kind of flip of the light switch to do this in 6 weeks, it sounds like. Were there any challenges in particular that stand out to you, or any state-specific challenges for in Georgia?
Yeah, I think, to start with, there's just the logistics challenge of getting that many devices out there, working with the different buildings and, getting schedules and everything like that worked out to deliver these devices and get them in the hands of the students. So I think logistics challenges and things like that were kind of first and forefront in our mind, because a successful rollout of the devices was going to be very important, obviously before we even got to the instruction point, which was also equally important. But I think just the logistics around that, the planning of building a network that can support that many devices, Jeffrey's critical aspect of building a Google environment that can support that many devices, how you're able to push applications and a store, an application store, and all those things like that to be able to deliver that content down to the end user. We also leveraged ClassLink so that we could create a single sign-on platform so that teachers could go to one page and have all their resources all right there in front of them, so that teachers didn't have to go out on their own and discover different resources. We were able to help provide that from a district level across the board. So it's all of the logistics and then the building of the back end that can really that really can support that was a huge undertaking that we really had to get together in a short amount of time to support a really fast rollout. Because again, when we originally went into this, we had the intent that this is going to be a multi-year rollout. So we thought we were going to have time to just kind of slowly build that, but then we had to build it, in a pretty quick fashion to go from 16,000 devices to 50,000 devices in a real short time frame. And Jeffrey can jump into more of the technical aspects from the Google side.
Jeffrey here. So some of the challenges that we faced as the rollout did happen and students started using the devices, one of the requests that started to come in real fast, especially at the high school and middle school level, was the ability for the students to print, centralizing that area so that the students are, even though we are now working in this Google environment where students are able to collaborate in a Google Doc or Google Sheets environment, however, there are still some educators that, let's say for example, for art, if a student work on a project, being able to submit that information over in a piece of paper, or the student being able to actually mark their draft on a piece of paper, for some students, that's the best way they are able to actually work on those drafts. So that became a challenge that was apparent on the first couple of weeks after the deployment, when the requests started coming in. We were able to actually leverage PaperCut. I'm not sure if you're familiar with their platform. We're able to put that platform up and allow for the students to be able to have a mean. One, it made it easier for us as in the admin technology side to be able to deploy printers directly to the students' devices, so that whichever building that a student was, they were able to have access to the exact printer they needed at the for the time that they were for the schools that they were in. So that made that was a drastic shift for the schools, because they were able to control the printing of the students' documents and had a way to actually allow for the students to print. Another challenge I know that came up was we also leverage another tool called General Audit Tool, or GAT. The biggest challenge that this tool addressed for us is, with students' data, also comes with the responsibility of making sure that we secure this information. As we give staff and teachers the ability to actually share that information out to students, the possibility of this information being made available in the public arena in search engines and so forth is real. And General Audit Tool was able to actually give us a means to confine this, so that if this ever did occur, we were able to retract a lot of that information so that it wasn't available in the public web, so that students' data was able to be protected and secured. We felt very comfortable, and we get a report whenever the report is run, so that we know that those informations are secured. In some other tools that we use there, we leverage recently in Provide IT. I've leveraged a couple of their tools to manage some of the Chrome devices, but mostly we use GAM for scripting into the Google platform. And there are other tools that we've used. So because those are the ones that I've used more so on a regular basis, they're the one that's coming forth now. But it's a combination of effort as a team in our department. So because we're all committed as a team, we're able to actually find solution when problems arise and get all hands on deck and come up to a solution that was able to deliver a successful implementation.
This is Peter from Neverware. One question on the back-end piece. Obviously, scaling in this small amount of time from 16,000 to 50,000 plus devices on your network, you don't necessarily have the time to do a detailed bandwidth study and really sit down and observe slowly what the needs are going to be for the sort of back-end, the wireless infrastructure, the LAN and the WAN infrastructure to sustain this kind of growth. Was this something that you did a really rapid study on, or worked with vendors who have done these kind of projects to give you the best practices, or did you try and oversize all of your infrastructure and sort of make a best guess? How did you go through that process and get all the sort of back-end bandwidth pieces? How did you get that all done in such a condensed amount of time?
That's a very good question. So I guess our answer to that is we kind of had to make our best guess. One of the troubles that we had was finding anybody who had scaled that quickly with that many devices. We really, our CIO had reached out, and we were really not able to find any other school district in the United States that had done an implementation of that many devices in that short of a time period. There are other districts that have more devices, but in that short of a time period, we were not able to really find anybody else to ask those type of questions to. So we kind of had to make our best guess. Everything that we have in the district, all 50 of our sites, come back through a centralized data center for their services. We had purchased some additional bandwidth in excess of what was given to us by the state. So at the time when we went into it, we were somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 gigs of bandwidth overall between a couple of different service providers. And as we kind of, made our best guess is to say, okay, here's where we're at with 16,000. Where are we going to be, and how much is that going to increase when we scale this up? So some of it honestly was a little bit on the fly, and throughout this school year, we've actually doubled that capacity in our data center. So we knew that we were going to do it with working with our service providers. We scaled up our connection to the internet. So we actually sit everybody behind a 10 gig, two 10 gig links to the internet that are really sit behind a BGP solution, so that we have some good resiliency in the event of a single ISP failover. So really we have two 10 gig connections within the data center that are really sourced from two different ISPs. In looking at how well we guessed, so to speak, we really ran mostly around 6.5 gigs or so of average bandwidth during the day. And that's with all the devices rolled out. That's even during testing time when all the devices are being used at a really full capacity. So we feel like we got lucky, or either that or did a really good job in making an educated guess of what that would be. But all of our schools come back here over a 1 gig link to the data center, and then they go out of the data center over the two 10 gig links with two different ISPs. So along with this, we also rolled in a new wireless solution within the districts. We were a completely blanketed wireless district. We had coverage and access points in all our classrooms, but we also did an upgrade and installed new Meraki access points in all the classrooms that kind of helped put some new technology out there, supported the number of devices that would be out there in the classroom, and it allowed us internally from an IT perspective to really manage an environment from a centralized location. We were really able to be pretty agile on making changes to that, since that's kind of a cloud managed environment. So all of those things work together to kind of build the bandwidth around that to be able to support that much out there. But I guess at the end of the day, to kind of answer your question, was we really didn't have a script to go off of. We just had to make an educated guess and we were able to, kind of make a pretty close guess as to where we needed to be, and we landed in a pretty good spot.
Oh, yes.
Cool.
So this is Jeffrey here. So I want to also emphasize on the point that, Dave being a little bit humble in the presentation of it, that the amount of work that went into getting this ready, I think is understated, in that we're saying we went from 16 to 50,000, but we're coming from a Windows environment to now going to a Chrome environment that actually is now highly dependent on having internet service in order for it to actually leverage. Whereas in a Windows device, as we all familiar with, and students did not were not as reliant on the web. So it was a huge undertaking, and the work that was put behind that and the success that we experienced from that, I think it's understated how great of a work that was done to get us there by all the team.
And there's all kind of details that is probably a lot more technical information than folks want to know around how, when you put that many devices on a single network and run them through a single firewall, how does the firewall react to that? How do you build a PAT pool that can support that many connections coming through it? How do you set embryonic connection limits on your Cisco FTD firewalls to support that many devices? There are a lot more technical details on the back end of that we kind of had to learn along the way, that there was really just nobody to go ask how to make this, how to support this, because nobody had really scaled that fast.
Yeah, and hats off to you guys. I mean, in my experience and Peter's experience here, I don't think anyone in the company has seen someone make the shift that quickly and at that kind of scale. So definitely our props, and part of the reason we wanted to share this with everyone is the uniqueness of what you guys have done and the impressiveness of it. So could you guys tell us a little bit about I guess your Windows devices then, and your older devices, and if you guys do you guys have an original plan for it prior to finding out about CloudReady?
So originally, we, as David mentioned, we had the 16,000 devices, and we had a lot of them were very old, but we had some recent devices that weren't as old, in the neighborhood of maybe 6,000-7,000 devices that we were able to refurbish and say, well, now these could be made available to the schools, so that during the time of testing and when the students leave their Chromebook home, and when a device is broken, what happened during that process? Yes, it's true, we're able to give them a device, but with that comes the support of, now teachers are expecting for them to have a device every time they come to school. During the time of testing, because we're a 100% online testing environment, it's not an option of a student not having a device to be able to test on. We have to have a backup plan. And so as we started looking into that, and the first thought was, well, maybe we'll have some Windows devices and have them available in the building so that they can leverage those devices and be able to test during the time. What we found out is when a Windows device does get put aside, and on the time when it's needed to be used, because of that delay, oftentimes it's a very long process to get that device going for the students to be ready to test, and there's updates to be ran. And then we also had a virus situation that occurred during that time, where there was some malware that was able to penetrate into our environment, and some of those devices were vulnerable to those malware. And so we started, I recall, in Dave, that was about a couple of months ago, we came and question came, how can we make those devices be ready whenever they were needed? How can we make this a success, not just when the students have the Chromebooks that we issue to the students, but whatever device the students are using? And because as I said, I mentioned earlier that I was familiar with Neverware, and having used CloudReady's environment a little bit before, and so I started digging into what would that look like if we're able to convert those environments. And I emailed Ben from a while back. I think Ben and I had exchanged an email, and it was more in the back end. And I emailed Ben and said, well, what can we do to actually just test this environment and kind of get a test platform going? And I guess we do deploy really fast, because that was within 2 weeks of that. We started the process going. And so I guess we make a habit of deploying a little bit too fast. But it's a lot to do with the fact that as a team, thankfully we do have an all hands on deck approach, and we do try to approach everything as a team and try to make it a success, and having the students in mind and the teachers and what's happening in the classroom, rather than really what is more convenience for our department. We understand that as an IT department, that we are in the education field, and the students and the teachers come first. And how can we make that a successful experience for the students when they are in the classroom? And CloudReady we're able to leverage CloudReady and bring about, I think about 4,500 plus devices that are currently out in the buildings, where students are able to leverage to be able to test. The device, we use a platform called DRC for our testing. And so there is a particular configuration that has to be pushed to those clients in order for the student to test. And being Chromebook, those devices being Chromebook as opposed to Windows, where we had to manually touch them before in order for us to get them ready for testing, we were able to deploy and have those devices ready. And again, we had the best testing environment experience since this is our second year being 100% online testing, and we gradually went from being a third 3 years ago, and then we did 2 grades, 4 years ago, and then 3 grades 2 years ago, and then we've been 100% online. And this last year was our very best. It was so successful, I think, throughout the whole testing environment, nobody was able to talk about it because we were a little bit afraid because nothing was happening. And they're like, oh, nobody's calling. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, and like Jeffrey said, I mean, really what it came down to for us was with increased concerns about malware, increased concerns about virus issues and things like that on some older devices that are out there, which were these devices that we wanted to do this CloudReady conversion on. And it kind of, when Jeffrey brought this to the table, we kind of all sat down as a group in the department and said, what is the best way we can provide the best user experience to the users and still be able to get some life out of these devices? These are legitimate devices. How can we extend their life, be able to provide a safe environment for them to use, and a really, really good user experience? And CloudReady was really the ticket to fit the bill on being able to get some extra life out of those devices and keep them safe and secure. So it checked all the boxes of what both instruction, technology, and what we as a department and as a district wanted to be able to provide down to the classroom for instruction.
And just to add to what Dave said, had we done the same thing and going with purchasing Chromebook to replace everything that was causing us a problem, we ended up, I'll say, easily saving well over $500,000 to over $250,000 in just leveraging CloudReady services, because we did not have to put that money up front and having backup devices that we already have devices that was already in the district.
Right.
Why not leverage what we have in trying to maximize every dollar for the students' benefits and their instructional benefits, and being able to leverage every dollar to give them a great experience and able to actually make it a success story rather than what we started to experience.
Yeah, and it showed that it kind of really paid for itself pretty quickly, and the return on investment was pretty quick, just in how much they were actually used during this testing cycle.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And yeah, I mean, have you guys been able to put those funds to other uses, or just to save them outright?
Yeah, I mean, we're continuing to do work to support this environment over the next 3 or 4 years of this SPLOST cycle. We knew going into this that it was a multi-year commitment for us, and leveraging, the right tools. And we have been able to take some of that funding and put it back into some other tools that Jeffrey will even use in the management of that Google environment. So it was really a success story for us all the way around in the very first year that we implemented it. It did not take us long to immediately see the advantages of it.
Very cool. So I guess reflecting, you kind of told us a bit about what current technology looks like. What are some of the lessons you guys have learned, and in the coming school year, what are the kind of key things on the chalkboard, let's say, to get done and either keep improving or maintaining this environment?
I think I'll say something first, and then Jeffrey's probably got some things to add to that. I think, building on the Google Learning Management System as a classroom will continue to grow over the next year, where we've got all teachers involved in building that Google Classroom and collaborating through that. Just building on the collaboration tools within Google is going to be a big one this next year. I think that we will continue to sharpen our processes of inventory and asset control. That's a never-ending process that we will always continue to work on. It was very successful this year, but there are some lessons learned, I think, just from a standpoint of collection and redistribution of devices and how we're going to do that in upcoming years. Continuing to build out a data center and applications within the data center that can support the Chromebook environment, but also do continued kind of traffic analysis and security analysis on kind of east-west traffic in the data center to be able to prioritize this traffic. As we continue to grow, we kind of threw bandwidth at it, because we just didn't know. We got lucky with our bandwidth. We were able to make some pretty good educated decisions, but at the end of the day, it was hard to find anybody who could tell us what to do. I think the bandwidth will continue to grow as more and more online applications continue to come into the district. But I think that the big thing for us is how we can leverage some applications in the data center to prioritize that traffic and continue to work toward a single platform for student learning management systems, and having that single vision across the district about whether students are learning at one school or another school or a third school. They're learning in the same way. They have access to the same platforms. They have access to the same good applications and everything across the district. And I think that's something that we'll continue to build on over the next several years, and just building the back end to support that, because that's what we're here for at the end of the day, is supporting what the teachers are doing in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to add to what Dave said as far as some of the challenges. Before even saying that, so Dave was very intricately involved with the planning of the bandwidth and so forth, and working with other members of our team. And I think and so I think because he was involved, he's being very humble about the planning that took place. And it really underscore that if we put the right vision forward and looking at how can we make it a successful environment for the students whom we serve, if we do have all hands on deck, and trying to consider all stakeholders, these guys did an amazing job getting that ready. And so I think it's commended to actually acknowledge that and say, you know, going into this, reaching out to the school system, and we were not able to actually find it. And so being able to go back into the drawing board and actually create a plan and to see that plan come to fruition, it's a good feeling. And seeing that, you know, students are, when you walk into a building and seeing the students actively engage in the discussion and actively engage with the teachers using whether or not it's Google Classroom or whatever learning management tool that we have or resources we have, and seeing that technology becoming invisible, which is a good thing in the classroom, where they are just using it and not worrying about it. That's a great experience. And you know, some of the challenges that we do have moving forward, because our Chromebooks that we do have does support Android apps, and we do have some planning around how do we leverage all these different apps that are going to be made now available to students. How do we curate the right store, making sure that students have access to resources without slowing down the great experience they just had this year in their school environment, and making sure that, you know, the students have access to it, but at the same time that we're opening the door carefully, making sure that the resources that are needed are available, but that we're not opening the whole Play Store, as you might imagine, could actually have some other things in there. But we're thankful as well that Google's environment doesn't allow for the whole Play Store to open. So those are discussions around that as far as how do we make that part a success as well. And I think it'll become even more successful because now the students will be able to actually have even more apps for them to actually use offline. For the students that do take it home and they don't have access to, let's say, the internet. If they have those offline apps, they can still continue to work on their projects and work on their papers and work on, let's say, they're creating a graph for math. They can still leverage these tools, even though they don't have access to the internet because of these offline apps. So those are some of the challenges that we do have ahead of us, and we do have other projects that are ongoing to try to refine places where we can fine tune in. But I think as a team, if we put our heads together, we can get it done, and it's been proven that we could.
You know, I think the big key to this, the whole thing, the whole implementation, and the success that's behind it, and all the work that's behind it, you know, being able to put the right group of people together and realize that single vision and have everybody continue to keep their eye on that vision. And that's not just internally within the district, it's all our vendor partners and everybody that was involved in that. This could not have been done by Henry County Schools alone. We've got some really, really good people on our team, but there's no way we could have done it individually with ourselves, without our vendor partners. This was a very, very group team effort to get this done. It's the only way we could make this successful. And we continue to just thank our vendor partners, and CloudReady was a big part of that, of making this successful. And we did not do this by ourselves. No one person had a hand in making this a success. This was all of us, including our vendor partners, together to make this successful.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like having good relationships internally, externally, coordinating and collaborating is definitely one of the things that you might pass on to other districts, as far as got to have buy-in from all of the relevant stakeholders, and in order to make it work. Are there other pieces of advice that you would give to other districts, whether they're just starting to think about a Google environment and a Chromebook environment, or if they're thinking about perhaps making the big leap to one-to-one?
You know, I think starting with your directory structure is a really important part of it. School districts are starting to be a lot, you know, obviously IMS global standards are coming into play, and how applications are tying in with the platforms. And I think making sure you spend the time on the back end to plan your directory structure as whether you're doing it Google only, whether you're integrating Google and Microsoft together and with a Google directory sync, or however that's happening, putting the planning behind the directory structure has been a real key, Jeffrey, to this as well.
Yes, and I think this is where that old saying, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, kind of ring true. Because having that, and not look, I guess the goal is not to look at individual projects, it's to looking at the whole, the global goal and seeing what that picture look like. So if it's successful, because what's successful to our district is going to be different from what's successful for another district. And being able to identify what that success means before the project is taken on and what resources are needed in order for them to align those resources to be able to achieve that goal is critical in the planning process, because once you identify what your success look like, then you can identify what do I need to put in place for me to get there. So, because we're education system, like, if a student want to be a doctor, part of that is saying, okay, well, I need to finish high school, I need to go to college, and I need to go to medical school. But within those are grades that you have to complete, right? You have to complete kindergarten to 5th grade, and you have to go to 6th to 8th, and then 9 to 12, and then you got to do your 4-year college. It sounds, those big goals in the sense of elementary, middle, and high, and college, and medical schools are big projects, but within them are all those little projects and the homeworks and so forth. And so it's identifying what that vision is, which is, let's say in the case of a student wanting to be a doctor, is being a doctor. But with identifying that vision is also being able to break it down into small pieces to be able to tackle that. You don't eat. I guess what's the saying that you don't walk the wall of China wasn't built in one day. I'm trying to remember it. Escaped my mind just now. Rome wasn't built in one day, but there was one about. Well, it just escaped my mind. But I think you guys have an idea of what I was talking about. But
yeah,
it's just basically having. It's if you're going up a step, like you're climbing a 100-story building, looking up make it look extremely astronomical for you to achieve. But if you go one flight of stairs at a time, you don't realize when you get to the 100th floor. Being able to identify those flight of stairs and actually tackle those and plan around those makes it a little bit easier. Not that it's hard, it's easier. It's going to require work regardless of what project you're taking on. But if you're willing to put the work in and focus on the project at hand, then you can achieve a lot. And different, like I said, different districts going to have different goals and different aspirations. It's a matter of being able to identify what that goal is and put the resources around it.
Yeah, and and this is something Jeffrey and I talked about recently too, and it comes back to any project, but especially a project at this scale. The most expensive project that you do is the one that you only do 3/4 of the way, because you never realize the value out of it that you could have gotten to. So I think the advice to another district looking at doing this is commit to doing the project all the way, get the buy-in. If you're not getting the buy-in from some people, figure out why you're not getting the buy-in and what you need to do to get the buy-in, because if you want it to be successful, you've got to maintain the course all the way through, and you've got to have everybody's commitment to make it happen at that scale.
And one thing Dave mentioned earlier as well is, and thankfully in our district that was true, is as the technology department, understanding that we are supporting the classroom environment and going back to the classroom and identifying what the students and the teachers need, rather than us saying, here's what you're going to use, regardless if it makes sense to you. But identifying from them and understanding what does success mean for the classroom, what does success mean for the principal and the assistant principal and the district level leadership, and then being able to wrap around that and find the best solution, bring back and say, you know what, this is what success means to you, and these are the tools we can use to actually get there.
Mm-hmm. So kind of it sounds like the major tips are kind of having a really clear vision of success and backing into, from that vision, all of the steps and how that's going to actually happen, who's going to be involved, when it's going to happen, what resources are going to be needed, having the collaboration between everyone to make it work successfully, and then also starting kind of with the classroom and the structure, whether it be an Active Directory or elsewhere, and making sure that you're compliant with global standards, and have the right kind of base foundation for being able to facilitate this at the classroom level.
Yep. Correct.
Cool. I think Peter had a few. No. Oh, okay. Well, I think we're probably getting towards the end of the webinar here. I want to open up for questions also to our audience. And I got a little carried away, didn't go through these these nice slides. But yeah, any questions from the audience? As of right now, you can chat them in, and we'll be happy to answer them. If not, I have one more question, which is, it sounds like getting to a 100% online testing environment was something pretty impactful for you guys and part of that vision for success that you talked about. What has the effect been for your team, as well as at the ground level and on district test scores this year? I don't know if you guys have gotten results already or not, but or at least preliminary results. But what has that meant to switch completely to doing DRC online and having that?
I'll tell you, because I was very involved with the testing portion as well. One of the biggest advantage from moving from paper and pencil testing to going online testing, testing time, I think in every district is a very stressful experience. The students are very concerned about the fact of performance. Administration is very concerned about test security, and district level is very concerned about performance, test security, and everything else in between. By going on an online platform and being able to test 100% online, I think it doesn't take away from the performance stress, but administration is able to better support the students, and the teachers are able to better focus on supporting the students, because now the test security is happening electronically. They don't have to worry about somebody walking into a building and having access to resources or to test questions, or any of that is gone, because the environment is now secured. They know when the students walk into a classroom and start to test, what they're gonna see is the test instructor doesn't even know what the text question is gonna be. So the focus then becomes the student and making sure that the student is relaxed and able to actually give their best at that assessment that they are taking. So it relieves a big stress from the administration, which carries over to the teachers and then carries over to the students. So in that sense, it really helped bring that to a full circle to support the students. But the other one that it does as well is, because testing is electronically, the time of collecting the tests, making sure the distribution of the tests, a lot of that goes away, which gives even more days back to instruction. So now, because it's electronically, we can focus on, okay, well, if we're going to test only for 2 weeks, we're going to test for 2 weeks, because that's all that's needed for students, for the amount of population of students we have, to be able to come and sit down in front of a computer and bring their Chromebook or whichever and be able to test and test securely, because we know that the test delivery is secure, and DRC has done a pretty good job revamping their system this year to support this. And so a lot of the back-end stress, I guess you could say, that doesn't have anything to do with assessing the student's performance, the student's ability to actually comprehend and master the content that they're learning, a lot of that now bring that focus back to the student and take away the process, take the process away from the assessment. So now the student becomes the focus, and that in itself is a successful experience.
It's amazing. We have a question from the audience. Can you tell us more about selecting ClassLink as your single sign-on solution? And are you doing anything with Clever?
So our instructional technology group kind of reached out and they're the ones that kind of landed on ClassLink because we knew we needed it to be a user-friendly, successful, very fluid platform to be able to meet the needs of a lot of different applications that set out there. The instructional technology folks really kind of brought that to us and said, this is going to help make this Chromebook adoption across the board a really, really big win. And of course, we were very interested in helping in any way we could make that happen. There was some different single sign-on platforms out there, Microsoft that we had looked at and some kind of, directory synchronization and the platforms in there that we could use. But we needed something that was user-friendly, that had a good-looking user interface, that everybody felt like was something that we could get the 100% buy-in from the teachers. It also allowed us to be able to integrate in the ability to integrate OneDrive, integrate Google Drive, and everything into kind of that single sign-on platform. So it was really around what was going to make the best user experience for the teachers and students in the classroom. So that's kind of what led us to that, and we feel like we landed in a pretty good spot from that, because I think that was a big deal in how successful it made that over this year. And Jeffrey probably got some feedback specifically from the Chrome side of it, but we feel like, I think in general from IT and instructional technology, that was part of the win for us, was that single sign-on platform and the capability to put all those applications out there in one spot. Because teachers, I think, what we didn't want to do is throw all these different options out there for teachers and lead them down all these different roads. From an instructional technology standpoint, I think that this kind of let us put it all in one place, where it made it easy for them to see what tools were out there and to be able to utilize those tools in the classroom without having to do a lot of extra work to make it happen.
So, and as Dave alluded to, so this was a success for us, because one of the challenges that we do have is having the different platform that teachers do use and students use for them to be able to access resources. Being able to actually have the central point for them to go to made it a success. One of the questions, I think the person that had the question asked was about Clever, with the difference between Clever and using ClassLink. We looked at the two solutions, the integration of the Google Drive and OneDrive, and being able to do our AD pass-through, because ClassLink does connect back to our AD environment and pass that through to some platform that are still using that environment for us to authenticate to. That made it a win for us, because we didn't have to change so many things in order for us to become compliant. It made it a very easier transition. The transition was seamless to the users, and they were able to get to the resources they need without much hassle at all. As far as Clever's implementation, I'm sure it is very successful in other districts based on how their setups are. In our district, it just made a little bit more sense to go with ClassLink due to some environment constraint we have. And so I'm not quite sure I can say one over the other, as much as whichever one best suit your environment would be the one that I would say that would be the best solution for you.
Mm-hmm. And we've heard of plenty of districts using either of them quite successfully. I've heard in particular of a lot of districts using Clever at the lower grade levels, and then ClassLink generally as kind of a a district-wide solution that's got some additional capabilities. We have another question, which is, can you please discuss the student data breach partner again, if you don't mind?
Okay, so we spoke in reference to Google Drive when I spoke about the securing the data information for students. One of the part of Google Drive is the ability for, in our case, in our environment, staff, because there's collaboration not just within our district, but we also collaborate with other vendors in other districts, and other vendors and resources outside of our district. So teachers have the ability to share content, and as well, content's all being shared with teachers on their Google Drive environment for them to be able to collaborate with. As great as collaboration sound, but collaboration without having some kind of a management around it can also be very detrimental if you have student information floating out there in the web. And so because Google Drive, we allow for Google Drive to, again, communicate with those external parties, being able to bring that back, what we do is, at least with GAT, with the general audit tool, in addition to a lot of other stuff we do with GAT Shield, one of the benefit of the Drive component of it is it does go every night and actually see within our district whether or not we have any document files, folders that are available completely fully public. And what it does is, and then it runs a script was written in the back end to then take those files and allow for them to revert back to shared with link, which doesn't impact the user because the file they share with that resource is still able to access the information, but that information is no longer available publicly for anyone looking for it. So when a search query is looking for that information, it's no longer able to retrieve that information, and it's secured in our whole environment. So now we feel a little bit more comfortable that student data is more protected, even though we still give the freedom for students, and well, really not students, but staff to be able to collaborate with external vendors.
Yeah, and that's just been a continued challenge for us, not just in the Google environment, but even back in the Windows environment, is just, and it's the same challenge for everybody. How do you walk that fine line of students and teachers being able to collaborate, but still keeping everybody safe? And that comes down to, sharing of files, sharing of all kinds of information. It includes down to web filtering and everything in between. How do you let people do their jobs, but still keep them safe? And that's just, I think, a continued line that we have to walk. And, that's a continued collaboration that we work with our instruction department to say, what is, where is that acceptable level of risk, and what keeps students safe but still allows the collaboration that teachers expect them to be able to get their work done in the classroom. So that's always a moving target. That's always something we'll continue to strive to make sure we're in that right place from now on. That's always going to be a challenge for us. But we do make sure we keep as secure as we can while still allowing that collaboration to happen.
And we can always do better. Yeah, I think that's the challenge. It doesn't matter how good we're doing, we can always improve upon it and find a way to make it more collaborative, yet at the same time secure.
Mm-hmm. We have one more question. How many devices were converted using the CloudReady solution? How long did it take per device? And what does the performance look like going from a Windows device to now running Chrome OS on a laptop?
Actually, as that question is being asked, I'm going to kind of try to give a pretty exact number here.
You can look it up in real time, right?
I'm looking it up in real time. And that's one of the advantage. Currently, we have a little bit over 4,000 licenses that we have available to us, and we have over little bit over 3,300 devices actually actively being used by the CloudReady solution.
Mm-hmm.
How long does it take for those devices to go from a Windows environment? Roughly, once you create the deployment tool, and I'll say, and again, not to, I understand this webinar is more of a, I guess, more of a general, not necessarily focusing on CloudReady, but our experiences as far as we've done. But I'll give some shout out to Peter for and Ben has been great, but a shout out to Peter in the sense of being able to create a virtual those disks and to make them available, and creating the virtual environment for me to test with has made it so much easier for me to actually get ready to see what that environment would look like, the deployment, what that process is, creating tutorials for the on-site support so that they understand how those environment works. So on top of the tool being available, I think it was extremely useful, the support that came behind it, from Ben, who's walked hand in hand from the time I reached out to him and said we were thinking about doing this, to Peter, who's made his time available to make those resources available to us. And as well, as far as performance, I'll say it's about a tenfold performance from Windows devices that we had that were taking about 4 to 5 minutes. Well, really like 5 minutes plus to boot up, to now booting up in about 30 seconds or less.
And then the time to convert it, I mean, it was not.
The time to convert it was about 5 minutes or less.
I mean, it was less than 10 minutes per device.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So most of the performance gains have been kind of like boot time.
Performance, boot time, and as well, once you get into the environment, because Chrome OS is pretty lean as far as resource utilization, and those devices were built to handle a Windows operating system, which is a lot more resource hungry. So all that resource now become available to the Chrome environment, which makes it even more speedy, more snappy as far as when you're trying to access a website. It loads about 10 times faster or more. So the advantages are a lot. I'll say some CloudReady converted devices even perform better than some Chromebooks we have, simply because of the resource that's available to that Chrome OS and that Windows, that device that was built to run a Windows environment, but now is running a much leaner and cleaner OS. So we had a lot of great performance gains.
And that's just at the base performance level. That doesn't even count the comparison between what those devices were doing before from a testing platform perspective, how fast we can get those updates of testing applications and just applications in general down to the device. Is there's also that performance over a Windows device when it was a Windows device.
The support.
We're able to get those applications down much faster, let alone just the performance that we're seeing on the local device itself.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, I don't know if it doesn't seem like there are any other questions right now. Thank you guys, obviously, for the nice comments. Peter,
appreciate it.
I don't know about me, but Peter's definitely helpful. But yeah, really appreciate you guys joining for this webinar, and I think it's been valuable for everyone who's been in attendance. So thanks again, and appreciate everyone in attendance as well. A recording will be going out of this, so if you want to share it with a friend, a colleague, or just watch it over and over again for old time's sake, feel free. And I'm sure Jeff and David would be willing to speak with anyone who's got further questions. You can also reach out to us, and appreciate everyone for coming and paying attention today. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
All right, cheers. Bye.